The camera sweeps across the Fox News studio, polished marble floor, cold blue lighting, and an air so still it feels premeditated. The kind of silence that isn't empty but waiting. Bret Baier leans forward, eyes narrow, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Congresswoman, you didn't answer the question." He says it with the authority of a man used to control, a tone that carries more judgment than curiosity. The moment stretches. The audience can almost feel the production crew holding their breath behind the cameras. Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. Her posture stays calm, her expression unreadable. Under the glare of the lights, her composure feels like defiance itself. Baier smirks, sensing advantage. "Let's try again," he adds, gesturing dismissively. "If you can keep it simple this time." A faint murmur ripples across the room. It's not loud, but it's there. A nervous recognition that something has shifted. That tone, that condescension. Viewers watching from home can feel it too. It's familiar. Crockett's eyes lift slowly, locking on to Baier's. There's no anger in them, just the kind of silence that unnerves men who mistake confidence for submission. The air tightens. A heartbeat passes. And then she smiles. A quiet, deliberate smile that seems to say, "You just made a mistake." The studio, once his domain, now feels smaller. The camera zooms closer, catching the flicker of uncertainty behind Baier's practiced calm. The tension isn't just between two people now, it's between two versions of America. One that demands silence from women who know their worth, and one that refuses to play by those rules anymore. A voiceover breaks through, steady and cinematic. No one expected what she said next to leave Fox News speechless. The lights seem to hum louder. The anticipation builds. Baier clears his throat, ready to press again, but the look in her eyes tells the audience that his next question might just be his last word of control, because this isn't just another interview. It's a reckoning. But to understand why this single moment shook Fox News, we need to rewind. Hours before the red light blinked on inside that Fox News studio, Bret Baier was in his element. Papers spread across the desk, producers circling like hawks. He adjusted his tie, eyes scanning a stack of prep notes that read less like questions and more like traps. The goal was clear. Corner Jasmine Crockett. Expose a Democrat contradiction. Deliver the soundbite that would dominate conservative headlines by morning. Behind the glass, a senior producer whispered, "Keep it sharp." "Bret, the audience loves when you press them." That word, press, echoed. To the network, it wasn't an interview. It was a spectacle, a test of dominance disguised as discourse. Meanwhile, across town, Jasmine Crockett sat quietly in her green room. No entourage, no panic, just a cup of tea cooling beside her notes. She'd faced worse. Courtrooms where justice hung on her voice, hearings where truth was drowned in noise. This was just another arena. Different lights, same battle. Online, anticipation was already reaching fever pitch. On X, the trending tag read, "Leisure Fox vs. Crockett." Some users joked it would be a bloodbath. Others warned Baier not to underestimate the Texas Congresswoman who doesn't blink. Comment sections were divided before a single word aired. Supporters of Crockett posted clips of her fiery floor speeches, calling her the voice of composure in chaos. Fox loyalists cheered for Baier, predicting he'd expose another liberal fraud. Everyone expected sparks. No one expected what was coming. The stakes weren't just political, they were symbolic. To millions watching, this wasn't Bret Baier versus Jasmine Crockett. It was establishment power versus authentic truth. Polished control versus unbothered conviction. The countdown to airtime ticked lower. 5 minutes. 2 minutes, 1. In the control room, a producer muttered, "Let's make this one viral." The first question hit hard, about accountability, budgets, and democratic hypocrisy. But beneath the words, there was something else. The old playbook. The tone that demanded humility from women who'd earned their space. The insinuation that intellect and passion could never coexist in the same voice. Baier's eyes gleamed with confidence. He'd done this hundreds of times before. But Crockett didn't bite. She didn't flinch. Her calm was unnerving, too steady, too aware. Every time he interrupted, her silence grew heavier, sharper, and in that silence something was shifting, invisible but seismic. The audience could feel it. The familiar rhythm of a Fox takedown was slipping away. The woman they'd expected to fumble was rewriting the tempo in real time. In the control booth, a sound engineer leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "She's not playing his game." The colleague replied, eyes fixed on the screen, "No, she's changing it." Because this moment, beneath the glare of national television, wasn't about a single question or headline. It was about a broader question echoing through every viewer's living room. Who really controls the narrative? And as Bret Baier leaned in, preparing to reclaim the upper hand, he didn't realize that the very confidence in his voice was walking him straight into the moment that would redefine both of their careers. What happened next would rewrite how millions viewed the word unflinching. For years, Bret Baier cultivated a reputation as the calm center of the Fox News storm, the man who could deliver confrontation with a polite smile. To the casual viewer, he was the moderate face of a network built on provocation, the journalist who wrapped sharp jabs in the language of civility. But beneath the composure, there was something else, a quiet calculation, an awareness of power and how to wield it without ever appearing to. Producers loved him for it. Executives praised his tone, his timing, his precision. He wasn't the loud one or the sensationalist. He was the controlled voice that gave the network legitimacy. Yet those who'd sat across from him, especially women, especially progressives, knew the pattern. The smile, the subtle interruptions, the tone of someone not asking a question, but delivering a verdict. Viewers saw it again and again. Clips of Baier cutting off an activist mid-answer, a congresswoman's face tightening as he twisted her words into a headline, a progressive commentator's frustration boiling just beneath the surface while he leaned back, expression unreadable, voice calm as he said, "You didn't answer the question." It was a formula, measured, consistent, and devastatingly effective. To the network, it was balance. To his audience, it was entertainment. But to those he targeted, it was something far more personal, a mirror of how America itself often speaks to its dissenters. Polite, patronizing, and sure of its own neutrality. He built his career on that tone, the balance between civility and condescension. The polite veneer that could disarm opponents just long enough to make their passion look like overreaction. His questions were crafted to sound fair, yet designed to corner. Every pause, every tilt of the head, every carefully chosen word was a performance honed over decades in the studio glow, and it worked. Politicians faltered, guests stumbled, truth twisted in the air like smoke. The applause of his audience, the quiet validation of those who mistook calmness for truth, became his armor. Behind it, he was untouchable. But there was something else he didn't expect, the fatigue of that very performance. Over the years, cracks began to show, moments when the control wavered, when a sharper tone betrayed frustration, when even his calm couldn't mask discomfort. For a man who thrived on having the last word, the rise of voices that refused to play by his script was becoming a threat. In private, Baier prided himself on maintaining composure, on never losing to emotion. But that composure came at a cost, the cost of seeing every guest as an opponent, every disagreement as a challenge to authority. The game worked as long as his guests played by his rules. The interruptions, the insistence, the framing, all of it relied on the other person folding, getting flustered, or trying too hard to stay polite. What he didn't know was that Jasmine Crockett was not built to fold. Her confidence, her rhythm, her ability to absorb condescension and turn it into clarity, all of it would soon collide with his old methods. And this time, the polite mask of control he wore so well would be tested in a way no producer, no segment, no audience poll could prepare him for. Because this wasn't just another interview. This was the moment when a rehearsed narrative would meet raw truth, when decades of dominance through tone and timing would crumble before a single line of composure and conviction. Bret Baier had interrupted countless voices before. He had silenced, redirected, reframed. But for the first time in his career, the interruption would not end the conversation. It would ignite it. And as the lights glared and the cameras rolled, the very method that made him untouchable was about to become his undoing, because this time, his trademark interruptions would meet someone who refused to flinch. Jasmine Crockett's story didn't begin under bright lights or in front of cameras. It began in the thick heat of the South, where words carried weight and truth wasn't a luxury but survival. Raised among people who knew the struggle between dignity and dismissal, she learned early how to fight without losing grace. Her voice was sharp when it needed to be, but her silence, that calm, knowing quiet, was what truly unsettled those who tried to underestimate her. Before the title of Congresswoman, before the spotlight and headlines, there was Jasmine the public defender. Long days in cramped courtrooms, standing for people who couldn't afford to stand for themselves. She faced judges who spoke down, prosecutors who smirked, and moments where justice seemed a million miles away. Yet she never flinched. Her strength was built not in privilege, but in persistence. Every cross-examination, every dismissal, every raised eyebrow from someone who didn't expect her to know her law better than they did, it all became part of the armor she carried into every room. You can't out-talk someone who's rooted in truth, she once told a young law student, who asked how she stayed so composed. It wasn't arrogance. It was faith. Faith in the evidence, in her preparation, and in the idea that calm isn't weakness, it's control. That line, simple but unshakable, would one day become her philosophy, her weapon and her legacy. Years later, that same composure carried her into the halls of Congress. In a sea of loud voices and endless noise, Jasmine stood out not by shouting louder but by choosing her moments. When others performed for cameras, she spoke for communities. When critics questioned her fire, she reminded them that not all flames roar. Some burn steady, unyielding, and enduring. There were interviews that tested her patience, debates designed to corner her, and hearings that dripped with condescension. She faced them all with the same steady poise that once filled her courtroom. Even in chaos, she found rhythm. Even under pressure, she found grace. And when the spotlight grew harsher, her presence only grew sharper. Those who underestimated her often regretted it. Opponents mistook her silence for hesitation, her politeness for passivity, until she spoke. And when she did, her words carried the weight of lived experience, layered with intellect and conviction that couldn't be faked. It wasn't just about winning arguments. It was about defending truth itself from being twisted into entertainment. Crockett's rise wasn't meteoric. It was earned inch by inch, built on years of being dismissed and still showing up stronger. She was the kind of leader who didn't chase the spotlight. The spotlight found her because she was the story people couldn't ignore. Reporters described her as unflappable. Colleagues called her fearless. Her supporters saw something deeper, a reflection of everyone who's ever been interrupted, talked over, or told they didn't belong. She carried their stories with her, and every time she stood on national television, she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was reclaiming space that generations before her had been denied. Her southern drawl softened her tone, but not her message. Her eyes, steady, piercing, unreadable, made even seasoned interviewers falter. She had learned that power didn't come from raising your voice. It came from making people listen when you lowered it. And as she walked into the Fox News studio that morning, she knew exactly what kind of space she was entering. The questions would be loaded, the tone skeptical, the interruptions inevitable. But she didn't come to play defense. She came prepared, with facts, clarity, and something Baier had long relied on his guests not having: composure. Before stepping onto the set, she took a quiet moment in the makeup room. No entourage, no noise, just her reflection, steady and unbothered. The producer gave the usual countdown, but she wasn't thinking about the audience or the headlines, or even Baier. She was thinking about the people who needed to see her hold her ground, the ones who'd been dismissed the same way she once was. When the cameras started rolling, She adjusted the microphone, offered a polite smile, and waited for her cue. She wasn't nervous, she was ready. Because she knew how these interviews went. The interruptions, the traps, the bait. She'd seen them all before, and she knew exactly how to dismantle them. Not with volume, but with clarity. Not with anger, but with control. Her calm wasn't compliance. It was defiance in its most elegant form. The kind that makes arrogance crumble without a single raised voice. Every part of her journey had led to this. The courtrooms, the dismissive glances, the long nights spent preparing when others doubted her. All of it had built her into someone who could face down the most polished antagonists and still walk away with her dignity intact. And as she took her seat across from Bret Baier, under those bright studio lights, her expression didn't shift. Not when he smiled. Not when he leaned forward. Not even when he tried to seize control of the narrative before it began. Because Jasmine Crockett didn't come to play the role written for her. She came to rewrite it, and when Fox tried to rattle her, that calm became her weapon. Back in the Fox News studio, the lights burned brighter now, the air dense with unspoken tension. Bret Baier leaned forward in his chair, that trademark polite smile fixed in place. To the casual viewer, it looked like a normal exchange, questions, answers, discussion. But beneath the surface, this was something else entirely, a duel dressed as dialogue. "Congresswoman, you're dodging the facts," Baier pressed, his tone still calm. But edged like a blade, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She knew this rhythm. The polite accusation, the interruption disguised as curiosity, the subtle tilt of power that Fox hosts had perfected over years. He spoke over her, just slightly, enough to control the tempo, to signal dominance. But this time, she didn't try to outpace him. She let him talk. Baier continued, his voice rising as he layered point after point, turning policy into provocation. "You've criticized this administration's spending, yet you voted in line with it. Isn't that a contradiction? Doesn't that make your position hypocritical?" The word hung in the air, heavy, deliberate. For a split second, the studio lights seemed to hum louder. Crockett's face remained unreadable. Her eyes locked on him, unshaken, as if watching a man reveal more than he intended. She let the silence stretch, longer than the control room was comfortable with. Producers whispered urgently into headsets. Someone off-camera signaled to move on, but Baier leaned in again, sensing an opening. He wanted her rattled. He wanted the clip. Social media was already buzzing, snippets of the exchange hitting timelines in real time. "Baier corners Crockett. Fox exposes hypocrisy." The hashtags were forming before the segment was halfway through. But those watching closely, the ones who'd seen her before, recognized the stillness in her expression. It wasn't retreat. It was calculation. She waited until he finished his sentence, his voice almost stepping on her cue. Then, with a tone that sliced through the noise like glass on silk, she said, "Are you finished, Bret? No anger, no sarcasm. Just control, sharp and absolute." Baier blinked, momentarily thrown off by her composure. He nodded slightly, gesturing for her to respond. "That's the difference between debate and deflection," she said, her voice even, measured. "You ask a question that assumes guilt, interrupt the answer before it lands, then call that accountability. But the truth doesn't need theatrics to stand on its own." Her words hit the air with a precision that caught even the crew off guard. Baier tried to interject. "Well, Congresswoman," but she didn't yield. "You asked about contradictions," she continued. "Let's talk about the network that claims fairness while interrupting every time the truth gets inconvenient." The room fell into a quiet that cameras couldn't disguise. Even Baier's expression flickered, a brief crack in the polished mask. He smiled again, tighter this time. "Congresswoman, we're just asking tough questions, and I'm just giving honest answers," she replied. "The only difference is I don't need to raise my voice to be heard." The control room panicked. Someone whispered, "Go to commercial." But the director hesitated. This was too good for ratings. On social media, the tide began to shift. Viewers clipped her response. Comments flooded in. She cooked him calmly. "That's how you handle bias. with facts and poise. Bret's face says it all. Baier regrouped, reaching for familiar ground. We're just trying to get clarity, Congresswoman. Surely you understand, but she leaned forward this time, meeting him halfway. Clarity doesn't come from cutting people off. Bret, it comes from listening, something this network seems to avoid when the truth isn't convenient. That line landed harder than anything she'd said before. The silence after it was deafening. In the booth, producers exchanged glances. No one dared cut away now. This wasn't just an interview, and it was a reversal of roles. The hunter had become the cornered. Baier tried to maintain composure, nodding as if still in control. All right, Congresswoman, let's move on. But he didn't move on. He couldn't. Her gaze held him there, mid-transition, as if she'd reached through the polished choreography of television and shattered it. The tension thickened. Viewers at home could feel it. That electric sense that something unscripted was happening. Something real, and then, in one clean, deliberate breath, Jasmine Crockett said the sentence that froze Bret Baier mid-smile. The silence stretched, long enough to make even the most seasoned producer uneasy. Every second on live television feels heavier when no one speaks. Bret Baier leaned back slightly, masking uncertainty behind a neutral expression. But Jasmine Crockett had already shifted the energy. The power dynamic had flipped, and everyone could feel it. She began slowly, voice measured, deliberate. Let's go back to what you said, Bret. You brought up spending. You brought up votes. You called it hypocrisy. Her tone didn't rise, but her rhythm built, each word landing with quiet precision. Do you know what's hypocritical? Questioning investments in education while defending tax breaks for billionaires. Calling for accountability in urban communities while turning a blind eye to corporate corruption. Talking about law and order, but never about justice. Baier opened his mouth to interject, but she raised a single hand. Calm, steady. Let me finish. That simple phrase froze the studio. The crew knew that moment, the rare instant when authority didn't come from the microphone or the network logo, but from the truth itself, she continued. Eyes never leaving Baier. I'm here because the people I represent don't get to interrupt their struggle. They don't get to turn the camera off when things get uncomfortable. You can cut my mic, Bret, but you can't cut reality. The audience, silent seconds ago, now buzzed online. Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube comments exploded in real time. Screens lit up with captions. She's ending him live. Crockett just schooled Fox with facts. Baier shifted slightly in his chair, adjusting his notes. Congresswoman, we just want to understand your position on... She cut him off, not with volume, but with composure. And that's the problem. You keep calling it understanding when it's really interruption. You keep calling it journalism when it's performance. A murmur rippled through the studio floor crew. Someone whispered near the control board, She's cooking him on his own show. Crockett leaned forward now, voice sharpening. Not angry, just focused. See, Bret, it's not about who asks the question. It's about who fears the answer. The camera caught Baier's jaw tighten, his practiced smile faltering for the briefest moment. His eyes darted toward the production desk, a subtle plea for rescue, but no one moved. The director was transfixed. This wasn't just television anymore. It was a reckoning. Crockett began listing facts, one after another. Like hammer strikes wrapped in silk. You say this administration spends too much, but the last administration added $7 trillion to the deficit. You call inflation a democratic failure, but it's global, not partisan. You demand accountability for border policy, but where was that demand when children were locked in cages under your president's watch? Each statement landed clean and controlled, unhurried. Baier's fingers tapped lightly on the desk, an unconscious rhythm betraying discomfort. And when we talk about accountability, she continued, let's be honest, accountability shouldn't scare you if you're telling the truth. But when accountability feels like bias, maybe you're not asking questions. You're protecting power. The moment hit like a pin drop in a cathedral. Even the hum of studio equipment seemed to fade. Baier blinked once, his face caught between disbelief and restraint. His rehearsed confidence, the thing that carried him through thousands of interviews, began to fracture. A producer in the booth whispered, Did she just say that live? Another replied, "Keep rolling. This is history." Across social media, the clip was already spreading like wildfire. Within minutes, Crockett Clapback trended nationwide. Edits flooded in. Slow-motion replays, captions, reaction videos. Viewers froze the frame right on her calm expression, contrasting it with Baier's stunned silence. Baier tried to regain footing. "Congresswoman, with all due respect, this isn't about protecting power, it's about holding politicians," Crockett interjected softly. "Then start with the ones who have it." Her timing was surgical, cutting through his sentence like a scalpel through noise. Baier exhaled sharply, an involuntary tell. "We're just asking questions, and I'm giving answers," she said, unwavering. "It's not my fault if the truth doesn't fit your script." The control room fell into absolute stillness. Someone mouthed the words, "Oh my God." Crockett's voice took on a new tone now, not defensive, but resolute. "You wanted to frame this as confrontation, but I came here for conversation. You wanted to catch me off guard, but the only thing you caught was a reflection of your own bias." Baier's smile returned, thinner, strained. "We'll let the viewers decide what they think." She leaned back slightly, eyes steady. "They already are." The sound engineer's fingers hovered over the console. You could hear a pin drop. Every second felt like a standoff between performance and authenticity. And authenticity was winning. Crockett continued, her cadence slow, deliberate. "This is what happens when you confuse volume for truth. When you confuse platform for credibility. When you confuse controlling the mic with controlling the narrative." Her gaze moved from Baier to the camera, breaking the invisible wall between politician and viewer. "And to anyone watching," she said, voice soft but piercing, "don't let anyone tell you that staying calm is weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest thing you can do." The studio audience, normally restrained, broke the unspoken rule of silence. A low murmur of applause rose, then quickly hushed. Baier inhaled, trying to steady the moment. "Congresswoman," but she wasn't finished. "You can interrupt me, Bret," she said, still calm. "But what you can't interrupt is the truth. And that's why I'm here, not for headlines, not for ratings, but because people deserve better than sound bites pretending to be facts." Her words hung in the air, unshakable, unedited. Then she gave a slight nod, the kind you give when you've said all that needs to be said. "That's all," Baier blinked. For once, there was nothing left to ask. The camera light stayed red for a moment too long, as if even the equipment hesitated to cut away from the weight of what had just happened. The feed finally faded to commercial, but the story had already escaped the studio. Within minutes, every social platform was ablaze. Politicians quoted her line. Activists stitched it. Commentators called it a masterclass in composure, and somewhere between the outrage and the admiration, a truth settled in the air. Calm had defeated chaos, and intellect had humbled arrogance. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was the spark of something larger, a cultural shift wrapped in one sentence, spoken by a woman who refused to flinch. The clip spread faster than wildfire, a 20-second exchange that lit up the nation's timeline. Within minutes, it was everywhere. TikTok edits, late-night reaction videos, split-screen debates on cable news. One side raged, the other rejoiced, and through the chaos, Jasmine Crockett's calm face became the symbol of something America hadn't seen in a long time. Grace under fire. Fox replayed the segment over and over, trying to regain control of the narrative. Their commentators leaned in with talking points about media bias and liberal theatrics, but the footage betrayed them. Every frame showed Baier interrupting, pressing, cutting her off, and every frame showed Crockett never losing composure. CNN aired the clip under the banner, "Calm over chaos, Crockett's viral exchange." MSNBC called it a masterclass in poise. But it wasn't just pundits dissecting it. It was ordinary people, resharing it like a digital gospel. On TikTok, the clip morphed into hundreds of versions. Some added dramatic music. Others slowed it down at the moment she said, If accountability feels like bias to you, each version hit harder than the last. One viral comment read, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." Another said, "Fox didn't see that one coming." Someone else wrote simply, "This is how you win without shouting." Across college campuses, students played the clip on projectors in political science classes. Professors paused mid-lecture to say, "This is communication power." Activists shared it in group chats, captioning it, "This is what representation looks like." Cable networks tried to reclaim the conversation. Pundits framed it as a strategic misstep by Baier or a moment of emotional manipulation. But the people watching didn't buy it. The audience had already chosen their hero. Online, you could almost hear the crowd forming, a digital chorus of validation, anger, pride. Tweets, stitches, and duets overlapped in rhythm like a rallying chant. She didn't shout. She taught. She didn't react. She revealed. She didn't play their game. She rewrote the rules. Commentators on progressive podcasts celebrated the precision of her response. She didn't just defend herself, one said. She dismantled a system, live on air. Meanwhile, conservative circles fumed. Hashtags accusing her of being disrespectful popped up, but they only amplified her reach. Every attempt to discredit her added fuel to the narrative that Fox had been exposed by its own tactics. By the next morning, news alerts read, "Crockett's viral moment hits, 25 million views overnight." Her name dominated the trending list, not as a controversy, but as a cultural shift. She'd done what few politicians ever managed, turned a confrontation into a classroom and an interruption into impact. Clips played in barbershops, coffee shops, student lounges. People leaned over phones, shaking their heads, smiling. She handled that like a boss. That's how you talk when you know you're right. And in homes across America, young girls, especially young black women, watched in quiet awe. They saw someone who looked like them, someone who didn't fold under pressure, who didn't apologize for being composed, articulate and unafraid. The image of Baier, frozen mid-smile, became an instant meme. The moment arrogance met grace. A caption under one viral post read, "When you realize the question just turned into your own answer." Political strategists dissected it on morning panels, calling it a turning point in how authenticity beats agenda. Even comedians joined in, with late-night hosts joking. Fox might have to start airing disclaimers before inviting Jasmine Crockett again, but under the humor was a deeper current, a collective exhale from viewers tired of seeing arrogance rewarded and truth dismissed. Crockett's poise reminded them of something forgotten, that calm could still command attention, and that intellect could still dominate noise. By evening, her words had crossed borders. International outlets covered it as an example of media power shifting in real time. European commentators called it a study in composure amid provocation. Meanwhile, in the United States, hashtags like Your Speak Truth, Crockett Effect, and As Your Grace Wins trended for days. She didn't tweet a response that night. She didn't need to. Her silence online became part of the legend, letting the moment breathe, letting the world replay it over and over, learning something new each time. And when her office finally released a short statement the next morning, it wasn't defensive or boastful. It was simple, reflective, just one line that summed up everything the clip had become. Sometimes, the calmest voice in the room is the one that changes it. Those words echoed across every platform, stitched into thousands of posts, quoted in captions, screenshotted into permanence. And just when everyone thought the moment had peaked, when it seemed the story had run its course, Jasmine Crockett spoke again. The next morning, the noise had finally quieted. The hashtags slowed, the panels moved on, and the world seemed ready to shift to the next story. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't chasing a news cycle. She was shaping a message. Without warning, she posted a short statement across her social media accounts. No dramatic graphics, no self-congratulation. Just words. Simple, steady, and timeless. True strength, she wrote, is staying grounded when arrogance tries to shake you. No hashtags. No shade, just clarity. Within minutes, the post spread like oxygen meeting fire. Screens lit up across the country. The same people who had cheered her mic drop now paused, because this time it wasn't about victory. It was about meaning. Commentators scrambled to interpret it. On Twitter, one journalist wrote, "She's not celebrating the moment, she's redefining it." Another said, "That's not a clapback. That's a masterclass in leadership." Fox News stayed silent. Even Baier didn't respond. And in that silence, Crockett's message grew louder. Her words reframed the viral moment from a confrontation into a reflection. It wasn't about ego anymore, and it was about endurance. About the strength it takes to remain still while others shake. Cable anchors began quoting her line at the start of their shows. High school debate teams printed it on posters. Comment sections filled with people saying it felt like something their grandmother might have said, wisdom disguised as restraint. Political commentators who had once treated the exchange as entertainment began treating it like literature. She turned a moment of attack into a meditation on integrity, one said on air. You don't see that kind of control anymore, not in politics, not in media, not anywhere. The tone of the nation's conversation shifted. What began as a viral takedown had become a mirror, reflecting how people respond to conflict, how composure could still command respect in a world addicted to outrage. Crockett's post became a rallying cry for a quieter kind of power. Young organizers shared it in group chats before marches. Teachers used it in civics classes to explain the idea of moral leadership. Churches quoted it in sermons about patience and purpose. Even those who didn't agree with her politics admitted something had changed. You don't have to like her to respect that, one conservative commentator confessed. The viral clip had been the spark, but her reflection became the flame, steady, calm, illuminating something deeper. Reporters reached out for interviews, but she declined. Her team said she preferred to let the message breathe. That choice, to say nothing more, became its own form of poetry. Every re-airing of the segment now ended differently. It wasn't just about her retort anymore. It was about what followed, the silence, the reflection, the lesson. She had turned a televised confrontation into a meditation on leadership. And America, for a rare moment, was listening. In classrooms and coffee shops, people started quoting her not as a soundbite, but as a principle, staying grounded when arrogance tries to shake you. It became something to live by. Commentators called it the most graceful comeback in politics. Others described it as a cultural reset in how power is expressed. And beyond all the headlines, beyond the virality and applause, her stillness remained the most striking image of all. That pause, the look in her eyes as she refused to mirror the hostility before her, had spoken louder than any argument. It wasn't the volume of her words that won. It was the weight of her calm. Her post closed the chapter, but not the conversation. Because in her silence, people found something worth echoing, that dignity, patience, and truth are still revolutionary acts in an age of noise. And just when it seemed the story had ended, her words reignited a national conversation. The studio lights dim. The echo of voices fades into stillness. The once bustling Fox News set, a stage built for spectacle, now sits in silence. Papers lie scattered across the desk, the faint hum of the cameras cooling in the background. Bret Baier glances down at his notes. The confidence once etched into his expression now replaced with quiet reflection. His pen rests still. The control he thought he held has slipped into something heavier. Realization. Across the studio floor, Jasmine Crockett gathers her folders calmly. No celebration, no smirk, no sign of triumph, just the same poise she walked in with. The kind of composure that doesn't need applause to mean something. As she exits the set, the last glow of the overhead light catches her face. Steady, proud, unshaken. The same light that once framed her as the target now frames her as the truth. And that's the story that millions would replay. Journalist Bret Baier interrupts Jasmine Crockett. Her clapback stuns Fox News, not because she shouted, Not because she dominated, but because she stood still when chaos demanded noise. Her calm became her power. Her restraint became her message. And her truth, spoken without fury, became impossible to ignore. In a world that rewards outrage, she proved that integrity still hits harder than interruption, because sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the one that refuses to shout. Share this story. Subscribe for more voices that speak power through truth. And remember, silence, when rooted in conviction, can shake even the noisiest rooms in America.